Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel, and if you are new, welcome to my channel. I am Jamie Beth. Today we're going to do another story time and makeup, and today's story time and makeup is going to be about the most haunted cemeteries in the United States. I have a list here of 11 very creepy cemeteries to tell you about. I do have notes right in front of me, so if you see me kind of looking here and there while I'm doing my makeup is because I'm reading off my notes. I can't remember all of this information. I just don't have that great of a memory. So we are going to go ahead and dive right in with our first cemetery. And our first cemetery is the Westminster Hall and Burying Ground in Baltimore, Maryland. There is a cemetery at Westminster Presbyterian Church in Baltimore, Maryland, and apparently it is the home of the Screaming Skull. I don't know if anyone has ever heard of this skull, but apparently there is a skull that does nothing but let out screams or let out loud cries. Apparently there is the skull of a minister that was murdered at this church, and every night at the same time his skull would start screaming. Eventually his body was dug up and the skull gagged before being encased in a concrete block, and which now stands at the edge of his gravestone or near his gravestone. According to locals who visit the cemetery, you can still hear the muffled screams coming from the skull through this concrete block. I would love to know if anyone's actually witnessed this. Next cemetery we're going to discuss is the Union Cemetery in Easton, Connecticut. Now, this cemetery dates back to the 1600s. It isn't quite difficult to imagine, why this cemetery could be haunted because of the age of it alone. This cemetery is known locally as the White Lady Cemetery after its most prevalent ghost. This lady in white is said to roam the cemetery as well as going beyond the cemetery gates onto the road that runs up to the cemetery. Several drivers have reported actually hitting this woman, so they're thinking that they accidentally hit somebody, only for her to disappear, to vanish in front of their eyes. Next cemetery we're going to discuss is Bonaventure Cemetery in Savannah, Georgia. Savannah is one city that is incredibly proud of its ghosts, so it is only to be expected that they have their own haunted cemetery to complete chilling tales to tell. The most haunted ghost said to be roaming this cemetery in Savannah, a little girl by the name of Gracie Watson. Gracie died at the age of 6 after coming down with pneumonia. She just couldn't recover from it. It is said that this little girl has been spotted kind of running in between the tombstones in this cemetery. Next cemetery is the Resurrection Cemetery in Justice, Illinois. This is said to be an incredibly creepy cemetery in Illinois. Even the name of it kind of goes along with the spookiness of the cemetery because it is called Resurrection Cemetery. The most famous haunting there relates to a spirit known as Resurrection Mary. Mary was apparently a young girl killed in a hit-and-run accident sometime in the 1930s. The story goes that she got into some type of argument with her boyfriend, and she decided to hitchhike home. As she was hitchhiking, she was hit by a driver and they sped off, so it was a hit and run accident. Some witnesses say that she is still spotted walking along trying to hitch a ride, and if you are a male driving the vehicle, she will actually get in your vehicle, and as you reach the cemetery gates, she will disappear. The next cemetery we're going to discuss is the Howard Street Cemetery in Salem, Massachusetts. Now, I do want to add with this story, I have actually visited this cemetery. I have been there. I have walked around it at night. It's very creepy to walk through it at night. There are trees that kind of line Howard Street that make the cemetery look even creepier than it probably is. There are trees that line Howard Street that make everything look more creepy. And across from the cemetery, there's actually, I don't know, like they're considered apartments or townhouses or something, but people live along Howard Street. And Howard Street is considered one of the most haunted streets in Salem. And if you get, once you get to the end of Howard Street, and I believe you turn left, that takes you to the old jail, which is now been converted into an apartment building. Getting back to the cemetery itself, we all know Salem, Massachusetts is known for one thing, the witch trials that happened in the 1600s. And one of the accused was a wealthy farmer by the name of Giles Corey. Giles Corey is the only one who was accused that was tortured. He was not hung. And what they did to him was they laid him flat, they put a board over him, and they started putting heavy rocks on him. And this was something called pressing. What they were trying to do was to get him to admit that he was a witch, and he would not do it. So they just kept piling on more rocks until he was no longer able to breathe and he died. Now he is buried in the Howard Street Cemetery, and I do believe, if I remember correctly, because it was quite a few years ago that I've been to Salem, is there are certain trees, there are a certain set of trees in the cemetery that kind of signify around where he was buried. I don't believe he has a tombstone. I believe he's just kind of over in a specific area of the cemetery. And if there's anyone who lives in Salem that wants to correct me on this, please do so, because I might have it wrong. But I do believe, if I remember correctly, that's what I heard. But he is in fact in the cemetery, and he does in fact haunt the cemetery. He likes to specifically target authority people, so like the sheriff's people, or officers or whatnot. He, I guess, finds them to be the closest to the authority figures during the witch trials that caused his untimely death. If you happen to see his ghost around town, that usually is a trigger that a tragic event is coming. Moving along to the next cemetery, we are now in Los Angeles, California at the Hollywood Forever Cemetery. Now this cemetery is registered on the National Register of Historic Places. There are plenty of deceased celebrities who call this place their final resting place. The cemetery even shares a wall with the Paramount Studios. One of the more famous ghosts that roam the cemetery is Rudolph Valentino himself. And those who happen to get a glimpse of him walking around the cemetery say he is just as handsome as he was in 1926. Before his untimely death. It was said that every year a mysterious lady in black would visit Valentino's grave, and you can still see her to this day visiting his grave, although she has since herself passed. I don't know, let me know if you've ever been to the cemetery and maybe have witnessed that. The next cemetery we're going to discuss is the Silver Cliff Cemetery in Silver Cliff, Colorado. This is said to be one of the more haunted cemeteries in Colorado. It isn't the ghostly apparitions that this cemetery is known for. It is known for the Silver Cliff lights. Now these lights are described as like a blue lantern light or small white spheres. So these mysterious lights are said to appear over this cemetery gate and then just kind of bounce all over the cemetery, like bouncing off the tombstones. There isn't really a cause for these lights to appear like this, and many of the locals believe it is paranormal. The cemetery is still a working cemetery, and it is owned by the town itself. The next cemetery that we're going to talk about is the Stall Cemetery in Kansas. And this is considered by many to serve as one of the gates to hell. Now that's interesting. There has been ghost stories linked to this place for hundreds of years. One of the focal points seems to be in an abandoned church that stands right next to the graveyard. Many people have had strange experiences when entering the church, including being grabbed by an unseen hand. On one occasion, Pope himself refused to fly over what he called a demonic piece of land. Local legend suggests that this has always been an evil place and that the church was built to cover the gateway to hell. However, after the church closed, it became a meeting point for witches and Satanists to gather and hold rituals. There is one tree in this cemetery in particular that is now growing through a tombstone, which is also said to be the focal point of all the paranormal activity. We are now going to move to the St. Louis Cemetery in New Orleans. Anyone who knows anything about New Orleans knows that you can barely take a step without running into something with a paranormal twist to it. St. Louis Cemetery is incredibly haunted. Most believe that much of the reported activity can be attributed to the fact that notorious voodoo queen Marie Laveau is one of the 100,000 people buried in the cemetery. This cemetery is regarded as the most haunted cemetery in New Orleans by pretty much everybody. Hundreds of people visit the cemetery and visit Madame Marie Laveau's grave, asking for wishes to be granted. On to the next cemetery. We are now in Boot Hill Cemetery in Tombstone, Arizona. So this cemetery is actually a cemetery that hasn't been kept up very well throughout the year, so it has that, you know, it kind of adds to that spookiness. Those who have visited Boot Hill Cemetery describe seeing very unfriendly spirits around the place. Many of the people buried there have links to the gunfight at the OK Corral involving the Earp brothers, Doc Holliday, and the Clanton gang. We are to our final cemetery, and this one is the Bachelor's Grove Cemetery in Bremen, Illinois. Bachelor's Grove Cemetery in Illinois is not only considered to be one of the most haunted cemeteries in America, but some would go so far as to say that it is one of the most haunted places in the entire world. A burial ground is tucked away in the middle of a creepy forest and looks spooky enough based on only its appearance. It was once used as a dumping ground in the 1930s for gangsters to leave their victims, and some of them have been said to wander the cemetery. I would love to go to this one too. This sounds really interesting, and it is, from the pictures that I've seen of the cemetery, it is pretty spooky because it just looks old and run down, and it's in the middle of a creepy looking forest. Pretty neat, I think. So that is the most haunted cemeteries in America. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, give it a thumbs up. Remember to hit that subscribe button down below if you haven't already, as well as the notification bell next to it to be notified of all the upcoming videos. Thank you so much, and I'll see you again soon. Bye.